Black Gemara. This is the Gemara for Erev Sukkot. Daf Chav Beis. We're actually up to Daf Chav Aleph on the Beis on the bottom. We're going through every case in the Mishnah that says that if you were in this particular situation, you mechalel, you ruin the avodah. The last thing we've been learning about the last couple of blocks was about the inyan that a kohen has to prepare themselves by washing their hands and their feet. So now we're talking about the kir itself. So the Gemara of Aleph on the base on the bottom of the page. Gufa. Let us go back. We learned before that the kir has to have enough water for 4 people. And then we said that Katin came along and he made that it should be 12 spigots there, so 12 kohanim can wash at the same time without having to queue up and take forever. Plus, he made a pulley system so that the water should not have a problem of lina, that it should go down on the bottom and merge with the spring water, so therefore it's not sitting in a clay shutters. There's hashaka there. So now they want to go. Let's analyze this. You need enough water for 4 kohanim. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, kol kir, any kir. That you don't have sufficient water that 4 kohanim can be able to wash their hands from it. Is ein mekatchim boy. You cannot use it. In fact, we learned before also that you don't have to use the kir. You can use the clay sharis as well. Any keli in the base of mikdash you can wash your hands from. But talking about the kir itself has to have sufficient water for 4 kohanim. And how do you know that?
Whatever keli you're washing from has to have enough.
No, the kir. And how do I know that? Shenemar it says v'rachatzu mimenu. This is a mitzvah. V'rachatzu mimenu Moshe Aaron abanav. And we already mentioned that there'll be a whole discussion in the kufs, early kufs, whether Moshe Rabbeinu was a kohen or not a kohen. But right now we're going along the shita that Moshe Rabbeinu is a kohen. So you have Moshe and Aaron and 2 children, 4 kohenim. Okay, Maisel asks a question. It says, "Kol hakelim, any kelim mekachin you can be mekadosh with is bein sheyesh behen revius, bein she'ein lehem revius. Whether it has a revius of water, whether it doesn't have a revius of water, and a revius of a like, as long as it's a keli of the base of English, we don't even need a revius. And so when it comes to washing your hands for bread, you need a revius, a minimum of a revius. And Teish already explained that at least you need a revius. You can wash 2 hands, but from 1 revius. Over here, there's no shear. So what do you mean you have to have a 4 kohanim? You know when you say you don't need a revius? So Rashi and Teis Halom Pshat. Rashi learns bekudah b'toicha means that you make a hole inside the side of this keli, and let's say the kir. You make a hole inside the kir. You stick a keli inside the kir, partially inside the kir and partially outside the kir. And therefore, even though it itself, inside that keli itself, there's less than the revius, but because it's coming from the kir and it's like internally inside the kir, it's good enough. It's more than that. It has a cavity, so it receives the water and sticking out of the keli, and you're washing just from that part. Even though in there is less of the revius, but it's attached to the revius. Chases learned it's not inside the keli; it's right next to the keli. It's totally outside the keli, and it's collecting water from there. But because it's coming from the revius, that's good enough. Says the Gemara, Menu Rachmana. The Torah says that what are you telling me? You can use any. You said before you can use any clay shutters. You don't have to have dafka the kiyod to wash your hands. So how can you say that when the Torah clearly says that you should wash your hands menu from the kiyod, and you tell me any clay shutters? So you says you're right, but there's a ribu in that pasuk. It says in the pasuk, it says yirchatzu. In the pasuk it says that rekodem mizbech yirchatzu. You can wash. It sounds like you wash from anything. So it's marbe, even not a kiyur, even from a clay shutters. Well, the rabbis clay shutters. Ask the Gemara. It already says v'rachatzu mimenu. You should wash from the kiyur. Why say again when you approach him mizbech yirchatzu to tell you lav dafka the kiyur anything? So why dafka clay shutters? Yirchatzu anything. Wash your hands. Hygienic. I'm going to buy you clay choil. You can't say clay choil. Mekabel chaymer. What's a kabel chaymer? Mekane from the base of the kir, and that is umakane mother the base of the kir shenim shechima. It's a clay shutters in a way because it's when you put the oil and you what do you call it? You indoctrinate the keli, the kir. You also do the same thing to the kana, to the base, and yet ain't a mekadesh. It is not mekadesh. The hands you can't wash your hands and feet from the clay choil. She'enim shechima clay choil, which has no shaychus at all to the base of midrash. Ain't a din she'ein a mekadesh. And how do you know you can't use the base? Maybe Taki, you could wash from the base. That just like I'm asking for klei choil from the rachatzu, why can't you say that what? That it includes also the kanai. Says the Gemara, you know how you know to exclude the kala. You want to look for your chutzani, you can't. The Tanya be reimer, yachol ye kan mekadosh rekim mekadosh. I would have thought the kani also can mekadosh. Tamalaimer says the pasuk. It said the pasuk was sisa kier nechoshes. You should make the kier out of copper. The kan nechoshes and make the base out of copper. Why do you separate them as two separate things? You could have just said lo sisa kier v'kan nechoshes. Why you make two separate things? To tell you that that the only thing that the kane has in common with the kier is they're both made out of copper and nothing else. Kier is made for washing, not the kane. Kane is the base. Oh, so we say for me it must be that it had a little bit, it had a little cavity, it had a little concave. It was able to collect. It wasn't flat, so it was able to collect water, and then you tilt it or something. So even though it had a toich, it's not made for the toich. It wasn't made for it at all. As look at Taisa Kavchay Mekano. It says Taisa is there that it says clearly from here that there was a toich in the kane. Otherwise, what's to talk about? It's like more like a box. Yeah. Sorry.
Like an upside down.
That's Rashi. That's Rashi. Traces it can mean table prutza. It was a box that was open on the side above. No, it was a box, so it was able to collect water. So practically, you could have used it, but the point you can't because the trader says that the only thing that's in common is the fact of the chayshes. What are you comparing? Even though you cannot use kani, but maybe you could. Why? Even though it had a toich, but it's not its purpose. Its purpose is to place the kier on it. It's meant to collect, to store things. So maybe you can use it to wash your hands. Ella, we learned word the menu. The muti klechol, menu ktafka the kier and not a klechol. But if you're going to be medactic from a menu that only from the kier, then why do you allow other kleshodas? Other kleshodas as well. Rabbi Rachman, the trader clearly said that yirchotzu, which is an extra word to expand to include kleshodas. So Maris, you have one miyut, mimeno tell you to exclude, and the loch and yirchotzu tell you to include. How do you know which one to include, which one to exclude? Maris, it's a little hard to understand what Gemara's havmin is. I mean, if you have to include one and exclude one, and you're in the base of Migdash, which one do you think you'll include? The kleshodas? Well, you include the kleshodas, exclude the kleshodas. I mean, what was the havmin here? Anyway, gives a head. These are kleshodas which have in common that in order to work you have to mechanech it, and you have to put the oil on it. Mashenkein the clay chayil. Not sure what was happening in the first place. Anyway, Amarish Lakish. Now we have a few dinim. Amarish Lakish says. Now we're still talking about dinim of the kir. Says the Gemara Amarish Lakish. Kol hamashlim lemei mikveh, any kind of liquid that you can use to be mashlim a mikveh. Mikveh needs 40 saw. If this can be counted as part of the 40 saw, then mashlim lemei kir can also use it to fill the amount of water you need for the kir. We just said before it has to wash 4 hands. And we're Daf Chav Beis at Aleph, and we're learning all about the kir. This is the Gemara for Erev Sukkos. So we're saying the Shlakish said right in the middle of the page. It's like a new din. So any kind of liquid, as we'll soon see what we're talking about, that can be that you can use to fill a mikveh 40 saw. You can also use that to fill a kir, what the amount of water that it needs. And of course, let me mishal make here. Levius, what's that? Call hamashim mikveh mashim make here. But Levius ain't a mishalim. But let's say when it comes to washing your hands for until the time, you cannot use that water. What are we talking about? What are we including for kia that you cannot use for washing your hands until Sedayim? What are we talking about? Elam, are we talking about tit hanada? We're talking about cement, which is very watery, because we learned in Avelim, we learned in the Mishnah there that you can use that to be mashed in the 40. So hey, what are we talking about? Manashach. The parashat, if it's drinkable, it's so watery and so diluted that even an animal could drink from it. Then I feel the nami. Why can't you use it for washing hands? And we eat ain't parashat. If you tell me that it's too thick and you cannot drink from it, then I feel the mikveh nami namashi. You can't use it for a mikveh or a kir. So where is there a difference between a until sedaim and the mikveh and the kir? So the Gemara Ella Lemute is coming to exclude. Interesting. Yavchushin adoimin. Red mosquitoes, and Rashi describes them. I don't know what the English name for it is. Mosquitoes that have no wings, but they're born out of the water itself. Because in halacha we have a concept of things that are born out of the air, out of the water. and like asexual.
It's like a water bath. They float around.
Yeah, they hang around the water, but they're mosquitoes, but they're not. They have no wings, and because they come from the water itself, halachically they have a din like water. Elamuta yevchushin adumin. And what? You can't use it for tizadayim. You can use it for kiyah, and you can use it for mikveh. I don't know if you want to go there, but that's you could use that as theory, right? The Gemara Ebazei.
That means if the bug is
it's part of the water, yeah, it's mashlim. For the Gemara, mashlim. I feel the nami. The entire mikveh is made up of these things. You can use it. What are you saying? The Shlaki says you can be mashlim. That means you have the majority of regular water, and you can use this to complete it. But if you're talking about these yavchoshin, then you can if the whole mikveh made out of them, you can use them. The Tanya knows Hashem Goyim Kol Shet Chilei B'Riyoshev in the Mayim. If it was created out of the water itself, Mad Bilin Boy. Mad Bilin Be'ena Shadog. You have these large fish. Let's say a whale, and the eyeball has its liquid, whatever the liquid is. You can jump in there and use it as a mikveh. What do you think? You only went to the mikveh? You went for davening. You know what we're talking about here? Not how saw. Nosan saw and not saw. We learned if a mikvah is exactly 40 saw, and then you add 1 saw of water, which is not really kosher for mikvah, and then
you got 40 plus 1,
and then you take 1 out. We say that what came out is that even though definitely some of the kosher water went out with it, it's all right. Nosan saw and not saw is all right. Like May paid example. Oh. How did it come? Add rubai until rubai, and most of Shem hold that this only applies to peidas and not to mayim shuvin. That mayim shuvin, some of Shem hold that even mayim shuvin also is only ad rubai. But most of Shem hold that this qualification that up to in other words, up to 20 saw of the water you can do this notel saw and nosan saw. But when it comes to mayim shuvin, even if the entire 40 saw turns out to become shuvin, you keep on going, like the filter keeps on going, it doesn't matter. Amar Papa. So that's what he's talking about over here. But by washing hands, no such cheshbon, not to solve also. Papa says, let's say you bore a hole inside by the side of the mikveh. I guess going to the Rashi again. You put it's inside the mikveh, a little bit out. And all it has is a device of water. The mikveh itself is 40 saw, and this comes from the mikveh, and you're sticking right out of the mikveh, and it's only a device. Madbilin boy, you're allowed to table the machtin v'tzenay. There's needles on these golden little forks that help for weaving. You're allowed to do it. Why? It comes from a kosher mikveh, and therefore you can be table in that as well. The Shlakish says that the mikveh, the water of a mikveh, the mayim shuv in the mikveh, you can use for a kir as well. So what he's saying, you don't need spring water. It sounds like by the kiyah, you didn't need spring water. Even mayim shuvin, you can use, regular water. You can use for the kiyah as well. But Tanya, we learned it says in the pasuk, it says that you should wash. You should wash the. Yeah, mayim chunas. Tell me, I mean mayim shuvin. I don't mean literally drawn water. I mean water. Yeah. Tanya, we learned you should wash by an oil. You have to wash the the innards before you put it on the mizbeach. And it says over there, but it says the pasuk b'mayim in the water, the loy b'yain. So water and not wine. B'mayim in the water of loy b'mos, not if it's diluted with wine. Even if there's real water there, but it's wine, also no good. And the Rashi says the ratio is 2 to 1. And b'mayim l'rabbeis sharmayim said b'mayim any water. The kavachayim l'meikir, and surely also that meikir as well. Surely meikir you can use as well. My kavachayim l'meikir. What do you mean kavachayim? If meikir is the same as any water, then what's the kavachayim? It's the same thing. They're saying kavachayim because meikir must be a higher standard of water. That means lav the mayim chayninu must be that the meikir use spring water. And therefore, he says that not only my mind, not only you can regular water, surely you can use kiyah water. So no, that's not the kavochem. The kavochem is the kaddish, the kedisha ma'isa. Surely you can make kiyah, which is holier water. Remember, you're preparing for a carbon to go on the mizbeach, and that's the kavochem. And not because it's spring water, you can use any water, but you can use mikveh water. But the kiddush, not the kiddush, the kavochem is even though it's holy water. Surely you can use it because it's holy water. But But Rabbi Shmuel learned Mayim. Rabbi Shmuel made a what do you call it? Into Rabbi Shmuel, usually Rabbi Shmuel. Here's maybe it's the wrong Girsa. 1 second. No, doesn't say anything. So Rabbi Shmuel. That Rabbi Shmuel. Sorry? Beishmuel, okay. I mean, so usually we have all over Shas Tana the way Rabbi Yishmael, who learns these kind of things. Here, nobody says it, so I guess it's Shmuel. You don't normally have Tana the way Shmuel or Beishmuel. That what do we learn from the word Mayim? That it has to be something she'ein l'shem levai. It's not called Meikir. The water in the kir is not called Mayim. It's called Meikir. That's called a Shem levai. We had this whole sugi in Psachim, the whole day about Mora. You have to use something which is a name on its own. Mayim. It's called water. But the moment it's called Fijian water, you can't use it anymore. And this is called Kia water. So what are you telling me that the Kabul Chaim you can use Kia water? If I can't, it says you can't use it at all. You have to make Kia Sheshem Shelavai. You can't use. Elos, it must be when it says over here, Kia, it didn't mean using Kia water. You can't use the Kia water. It's the Shem Levai. It meant the kind of water that you have in the Kia, surely you can use. What's the kind of water? If you can use regular water for Kia, like mikveh water, then it's no different than anything else. Must be that it has to be what? Spring water. And that's what you say, Kabul Chaim the make Kia. It doesn't mean using the Kia itself, it means the water that you use in the Kia. Elalab, the Ruyin the make Kia. Alma, what is he from here? That Mayim Chaiminu. We see that the Kia use spring water. The Gemara, you're right. Tanoihi. Tamachlekes Tanoim. Rabbi Yeruchim said, Meikia, Rabbi Shmuel, Mei Ma'ayin. Doesn't that tell you that it's Tanah the Rabbi Shmuel? That Rabbi Shmuel is the one who says spring water. And the Chachamim Mishan name is any water. And we don't have a reason why spring water. But now we do, because the same, because maybe other water. Why Dafka spring water? I don't know. Why spring water? But that's what he's saying, that the Kia he meant spring water. And yeah, we're continuing down the Mishnah. The Mishnah is saying that the Kohen, under these circumstances, whatever he touches base midrash, he ruins it. So what's the next one? Odel. An Odel is somebody who's not circumcised. A general rule we have in Yevamos, we have in many places, the Machlekes, Rashi, and Taisus every single time. Rashi, I mentioned it last time, but the Taisus, a little Taisus right here, encapsulates it. Look at Taisus Odel. Mefarish Abenu Shloime. Obviously, this is not for Rashi. Grandchildren wrote this. Mefarish Abenu Shloime. Rashi b'chol mokum. What's an odel that we don't allow to work in the base of Migdash? Shemeisa echa machmila. It's not his fault. The halacha says he's a hemophiliac, or the family, there's a tradition of hemophiliacs. It's a sakarish nefashos. He's not allowed to mal himself. Even though it's not his fault, that the halacha says he can mal himself, he cannot serve in the base of Migdash because he's the fact is that he's not gemala. Rabbeinu Tam says no. Rabbeinu Tam says if that's the story, he could work in the base of Migdash. So what do you mean odel? Mefarish de mumer la'arolos. We're not talking about a guy how halacha says he shouldn't. Halacha says he should. No, according to Rabbeinu Tam, if the halacha says he shouldn't, it's not a chsaron. It's not a chsaron that he's not gemalit. Just like we say Isha command dummy. It's not a chsaron. According to Rashi, even though it's not his fault, he's an oinus. But only command dummy. The fact is that he's a chsaron. He's not gemalit. I mean, that's a interesting machlekes. With halacha says he can't do something, so there's something missing, but you have no breda. Or in this case, nothing is missing. So many times, such a kind can work, Navas. So what are we talking about over here, Mumer? An Odel. The Mumer La'arolos, he doesn't want to do the mitzvah of Milah. He doesn't want to do it. Oh, one second. But the Gemara will say it's called Libel Shemaim. The Gemara says Libel Shemaim. So according to Rashi, it makes sense, Libel Shemaim, because he wants to, but the Torah doesn't allow him to. But according to the main time, it's a Mumer. Why Libel Shemaim? So interesting, he says here. The father, because the kid is 8 years old, so the father doesn't want to do it because he thinks it's what do they call it now? Like domestic violence, or they call it abusing a child. And yet we call him libel l'shamayim. So even though he's doing the wrong thing, he's doing it for a good reason supposedly, and we call him libel l'shamayim, right? Which is a very it's a big scale libel l'shamayim. We always say libel l'shamayim means kavanah. Here, his kavanah is not ritzuya. But because he means well, we'll call him Libel L'Shamayim. I'd leave Libel L'Shamayim in other activities. He's not a bad person. And let's continue. Interesting. Because you have constantly in all these countries they're trying to ban, like in Iceland, they ban bris milah because they say it's primitive or it's dangerous, harmful. Anyway, we already had before. We don't know this from the Torah. Ella Medivi Cheskel Ben Buzi Lamadu. We learned from Cheskel. Interesting, we call my father's name, but Ben Buzi Lamadu. And we already said before, until Ches came along, how do we know? Because it was Gemara, and then we just passed it down, and he decided to record it. It says in the pasuk, "Kol ben nechel aral leiv aral basik." Called two kinds of oral. There's an aral leiv, pushed up the hearts, and close of the heart, and aral basar. And also in the flesh, he didn't do the bris. He should not enter my base hamikdash and serve me. But you go further. The Mishnah says not only he's not allowed to, but if he did, he ruins whatever he did. How do we know that? How do you know that he actually ruins the avodah? Because it says in the pasuk, "B'havei achim," if they come in, b'nei necher, if they're going by Beis Hamikdash, and what happens? Lechalalas Beisi, they're going to ruin whatever they do. It's clear. So now we'll go further in. I would have thought maybe he's a guy. I would have thought when he says over there that Ben Necha shouldn't walk the Beis Hamikdash, shouldn't work, he meant a guy. It says in the pasuk Aral Lev. That means that he's not a bad. He's not a goy at all. He's of us. He's not doing the right thing with his heart. He came out that he's not that this person, the first person we're talking about, is a guy who's not following the Eibishter, a woman. Nachmi friend. Yeah. Estranged. Mainly Aral Lev. Aral Basar 9. If physically he doesn't have a bris milah, he's not a weird base major. Aral Basar. Why do you need both Aral Lev and Aral Basar? So need both. Because Aral Basar, I would say Mishnah. The fact is, he still has an orla there, so it's physical miaskai. Aral Lev the loy mois. Physically, there's nothing wrong with him. Maybe he can work the base of English. Aral Lev Aral Lev is not in heaven. Aral Basar the libel shemaim. Now, libel shemaim is referring to his avoid in the base of English. That he'll be doing the right thing in the base of English. Is a maloi sicha, therefore we need it. And Taisa is interesting that even if the kohen does tshuva in the middle of the avodah is fafal, because you have to be ready before you start the avodah already. You can't start out at alev and then he's in the base of English and suddenly he's chapskan tshuva. Tame puzzles. We have an interesting gemara here. How to look up. Tame puzzle. Amru ziknei dar. So it says in the Mishnah, the next case. The next case in the Mishnah is that the kohen is tamei, then the carbon is puzzle. Now there's a couple of things you have to know beforehand. We have a concept called tumahuta b'tzibur. We have psach that if the tzibur is tamei, we'll bring the carbon. Not that you can eat from it, but you bring the carbon and you get to the carbon. And then we have a carbon yachid. Carbon yachid, if you're an individual, you're tamei, we can't bring your carbon. There is a question. Okay, there's a question. What about if you're tamei sheretz? If you're tamei sheretz, and that night, tumah sheretz is only for the day. You go to mikveh, you wait till sunset, you're all right. Can you bring shulchan? Can you send your carbon to the base of meeting during the day? Even though right now I'm a tamei sheretz, but tonight I'll be able to eat. Or not. So machlekes in sukkah as well as a machlekes, if you can. While you're a tamei, by kohen, not by you. Yeah, and you lean it that night. Can you? Can't you? Or the same thing is that the Gemara Sukkah compares a tumah mess, but it's on the seventh day, and that night he'll be all right. Can he? For example, we the holy in Pesach Sheni is because the anachmat mein nefesh adam. Can you? If there was a seventh day, could they brought in Pesach Rishon because that night they can eat, even though right now they're not shaykh to it because they're still tamei. Still need Hazor, Shiva, whatever it is, they still need. So therefore, that's something. Another thing is also, when we say Tumuhuta B'tzibur, are we talking about Tumuhuta B'tzibur only Tumas Meis? Because that's what we learn at the Pasuk, right? By Pesach Sheni, is talking about they were Tamim and Meis, and the Nefesh lead, or even a Tumas Sheretz as well. We say if everybody's Tamim Tumas Sheretz, Tumuhuta B'tzibur. Now, what about the Kohen? What about the Kohen is Tamim? If the kohen is tummy by a tzibur, he can bring it. Maybe even if you have a choice to get a kohen, we don't need to, or not. And then what about the kohen tummy for a yachid? So that's the discussion we're going to have right now. Says the Gemara, tummy possible if a kohen is tummy and he brings a carbon, it's possible. Amru ziknei dorim, the ziknei dorim, the elders of the south. Who exactly they were, but these smart people and the elders from the south, they came along and said the following thing: when do we say that it's possible? When do we say that if the kohen himself is tamei and he does it, if the kohen is tamei sheretz, I will tamei mace. But if the kohen is tamei mace, which you would think is worse. then surely the animal, no. Mitoich sheberatze betzibur, but that's not b'yachid. Since by a tumei mess in the tzibur, we suspend the laws by a tzibur, so it shows in a way there's a weakness, there's a kula. There's a kula by tumas mess. We allow a kohen, tumei mace, to do, if not allow, he shouldn't do avodah, but if he did avodah, the animal does not become puzzle. That's what they said. Says the Gemara. Now we know tumah huta betzibur because there's memoya doi, right? And the memoya doi that even either because the korban pesach is the korban betzibur, or even if you hold it as a korban yachid, but it has to be a certain time. So memoya doi pushes away. Now feel b'Shabbos and feel b'tumah. Said the Gemara Hachiv. So tamei sheretz nami lace. If you're going to go as far as say that the kohen himself could be tamei sheretz and mimakriv. So too, if the person bringing it is tamei sheretz, he should be able to bring it up. So tamei sheretz also should be able to bring the carbon. Use the same kavachayim. Ma'ader tamei mace, which is so strict. Shetau and hazor shlishi shvi, and yet medatze, and yet it forgives. Right. So it's tamei sheretz. She'ena toan hazor gimel ain't din shemanatza. So surely a tamei sheretz also the people should be able to bring the carbon. Should be, and yet we don't. Yet we know only tumas mess and not tumas sheretz. But following kavachayim because it's a kula, then surely you should be able to. So the Gemara Kasavri Ziknedorim. When do we say that tumas dechuya? When you have no breda. If we don't allow it, no carbon. But they hold that since you can bring a carbon while you're tamei sheretz, send it in, because that night you can eat it. So there's no reason to rely on and since the whole thing is tchuya, tumat tchuya b'tzibur, why should we go ahead and use the rules of tumat tchuya b'tzibur? You can wait. You can bring the carbon. It's not a problem. And that night you'll eat it. So there's no basis for it. That the kohen is just like the people who are being atoned. Just like the mischapin. Just like when it comes to the Yidden, the people are bringing the carbon. The heter only applies to tamei mace. It does not apply to tamei sheretz. Is af mischapin the kohen who's doing the avodah tamei mace in tamei sheretz loy. That what the people are doing the avodah is tamei mace. They can do. So the kohen, if he's tamei mace, if the kohen himself is tamei mace, but the carbon is all right. But if the tamei sheretz, it's no good. But why? Because the kohen is a mirror image of the people who are bringing the carbon. And what's the din the people bringing the carbon, the tamei sheretz? We wouldn't suspend the rules b'tzibur. So therefore the kohen can't do it either. That's what I'm talking about, tamei sheretz. But it since by tumas mace we say hutra b'tzibur. So therefore the kohen, even if it's doing for yachid, if the kohen is tamei mace, it's all right. My kasavli, what do they hold? The more let's understand. Tamei mace we push away, and tamei sheretz we don't. If they hold ein sheichtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz, if they hold that Yitaka cannot bring a carbon while the guy is tamei sheretz, I don't care that tonight you're allowed to eat it, but right now you can't. Then what's the chiluk tamei mace or tamei sheretz? A tamei mace in 7 days is no different than tamei sheretz. That today you can bring a carbon. So why that you're going to be matter and betzibur and this you're not going to be matter to swara? Am I law of the tzibur betumah? Hakol should be yachinich tzibur of the betumah. Anything that a yachi cannot bring, the tzibur pushes away. So why taka tamei sheretz? What do you tell me this rule that only applies? This tumah huta betzibur only applies to tumas mess and not if there were tamei sheretz. Ella kasabim. Obviously they hold that sheichtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. Obviously they hold that no, when it comes to tamei sheretz, there's a way out. Shechter today, send it to the kohenim, and that night you'll eat it, so we're not going to allow it. So Tumah Sheretz has this chumrah, and that's why they say if the kohen is Tamei Sheretz, he ruins the carbon. But if he's Tamei Mace, since by a tzibur we allow it, we don't allow the kohen. B'di'evet. Interesting expression in the Gemara here. Amar Ula. Ula says, Taka Lurish Lakish. Not only he didn't agree. Taka Geshriyan on the top of the roof. What are you talking about? L'dromai to these people of the south of the Daf. He says it doesn't make sense. So you're saying here the whole thing doesn't make sense. Who's screaming against them? So the whole thing doesn't make sense. You're going to tell me that a kohen who's tamei mace is allowed to, if he shechts it's all right, and tamei sheretz if shechts not all right. The whole thing doesn't make sense. In Svara, he said, "Tell me a question." He says, "He says, who is stronger? Who is stronger to push away tumah? Mechapin or koyach mischapin? Which koyach is stronger? Koyach mechapin, the kohenim more shechting, or the koyach of the people who's bringing the animal? You yourself say that a tamei sheretz, you can send your kabbanis in.
The
mischaper, and the tamei mace you can't. So who is stricter? A tamei mace is stricter. And then you tell me when it comes to the coins the other way around that a Tommy Mace is lenient. It doesn't make sense. He said, I understand. Madach in a place. If they become Tameh, Mamish themselves Tameh, yet Mishalchit Kabbalah say, and they can send the Kabbanas, and yet you tell me, so no, it's a guy who's Tameh Sheretz can bring a carbon. Just don't walk in the base of Midrash, send it in, because that night you can eat it. And yet the din is now Mishnah, you agree that Koyin Shinit Mabisheretz and Eratza. But the Koyin, if he's a Tameh Sheretz, he can't. So surely in Tumei Mes, if a guy is Tumei Mes and he can't send if it's not the 7th day, the other days he cannot send it in, his kabbanas in, and yet you want to tell me, so that means the mischaprin are so strict they can't send the carbon, yet the kohen want to tell me he's no problem. It doesn't make sense. So surely if a kohen is Tumei Mes, surely he cannot shecht. So the Gemara, you're wrong. The thing is on hold if it's a 7th day, Tomei Mace, Nami Mishalech Kavanaisa. They hold taka that a Tomei Mace. Okay, the first day he can because he's tummy. He's not going to eat the carbon. That's not a chumrah in Tomei Mace. It's a fact because you can't eat the carbon. But the 7th day of the Tomei Mace, they could. There's no chumrah. You're telling me that the Tomei Mace is more chumrah. It's not. It's the same thing. Mishalech Kavanaisa. How could it be? Well, see, it says in the pasuk, "Ish ki yiyeh tamei v'asa pesach b'chodesh hasheni." It says clearly you should wait till Pesach Sheni, and it makes no difference whether you're tamei mace the 5th day, the 4th day, the 5th, the 6th day, even the 7th day. It says clearly in the pasuk, if you're tamei, even if it's the 7th day and that night you can eat, wait till Pesach Sheni. That means that there's no way that tamei mace is much stricter. Says no, l'mitzvah, l'chatchila, wait till Pesach. But if you want to do that Pesach, you can. It says ish lefi achloi. It says that every person has to be able to eat. You have to nominate people on Korban Pesach. They have to be able to eat. That means at the time of the shechita when you're nominating them. Said in Gemara ulekuva loy. But it's not makif. What do you mean it's not makif? But Tanya, we learned, it says in the pasuk, the michzas and the foshas, you have to count the people that you are going to include in your Korban Pesach. Melamed she'ein ha-pesach nishchet ela lemenuyev. That the only way you can shech the Pesach is you have to have the people in mind when you shech your Korban Pesach. Shachtu shaloi menuyev. What happened? You shechted it and you had people who didn't nominate for the Korban Pesach. And you had in mind other people who don't even know about your Korban Pesach and they would nominate. Yachol yehei ka'over ala mitzvah. I thought, okay, you did the wrong thing, but nothing wrong with the carbon. It says in the pasuk tachoiso again. It says the michsas nefashos. That's a tachoiso. What do we have a rule by kachim? Shana olav hakasul laka. Whenever the Torah says it twice, that means this is the only way you can do it. Another way. Shana olav hakasul laka tell you that they have to be nominated, and then it says the in the brayse ishkish oichlin lemenuyin. That just like that the people that you're going to nominate have to be part of the carbon, otherwise the whole carbon is ruined. So too, the people that you nominate have to be able to eat the carbon. But if you nominate a person who's sick or a person that has no teeth, that he cannot eat a kazayis, then the whole carbon is possible. So l'chayda, that means that right now the Tmei Mace, the Tmei Mace cannot eat from the carbon. So how can you nominate in the shechita? So what is the Zikna Dorim saying that they hold that a Tmei Mace the 7th day you can include them in the carbon because they can eat that night, and therefore there's no chumrah in Tmei Mace over Tmei Sheretz, no such thing, because they have to be able to eat now at the time of the shechita.
A case by the Korban Pesach where if someone's in a prison and you know he's going to be released, you can count him for the Korban Pesach.
Yeah, but that's not. But you in the prison you can eat as well. Just you're not in the right place. Here, but you can't do that time.
He's not there. Actually.
No.
He's not there.
But he's a row. He's a row. These guys are not the rower right now. They're not the rower at all because they're tummy. So the Gemara Ziknei Dorim lemakshi. They don't believe in this hekesh of oichlin to menuy. They don't believe it. But the Gemara, you still ask. The whole svara doesn't make sense. So madach still doesn't make sense. Madach in a place where you're tummy sheretz. Shemishalchin carbon is saying lechatchila. Let us in the kabbanas because that night they can participate. And yet, koyin shenit b'sheretz. That's pretty cool. Mekel, you're pretty mekel by tumah sheretz when you talk about the mischaprin. And yet, if the koyin is tumah sheretz, the Mishnah clearly says is mechal of the carbon. Eino maratza, he ruins the carbon. To makom shenit mubaylim b'mes. You yourself said that's still better to do Pesach Sheni. So in a place where let's say the bailim became tummy mace, she'ein mishalchik carbon and say wait till Pesach Sheni. No, if he did, it's all right. But so it's still more chomer than Tumah Sheretz. By Tumah Sheretz, go ahead, say no problem. You know, sheichtim v'zoikin, you can send and do everything and on behalf of a tummy sheretz, because that night he's all right. But by tummy mess, it's not l'chatchil, it's only the evet. And yet you want to tell me that a kohen should, you want to tell me that a kohen should be able to shecht the animals still good? Doesn't make sense. Kohen didn't make any dish, any matzah. That's why the Shlok is screaming. He said the whole thing, even though you have a nice pulpul, but in common sense, it doesn't make sense. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.